So as I'm sure you know by now, the US government recently passed a $2.2 trillion stimulus bill that includes hundreds of billions of dollars in loans and grants and other types of support for small and large businesses. But the most important part that you probably care about is the $1,200 stimulus checks that most Americans will be receiving in the next week or so. And while at the time of making this video, not a single person has received the check, the US government has already started discussion on a second round of direct payments to US workers. So today, let's look at what the next stimulus bill could look like and how it will affect you and your financial goals. Let's jump right into it.
Hit it.
What is going on, everyone? I hope you are all doing well and staying safe. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button if you get any value out of today's video. So if you missed my last video about the first round of stimulus checks, you can check that out by clicking right here. But if it's easier for you, here is a 10-second crash course on what you missed. So taxpayers filing as a single individual who make less than $75,000 a year will be receiving a $1,200 check from the US government. Married couples filing jointly who make less than $150,000 a year will receive a $2,400 paycheck. This amount steps down by $5 for every $100 you make beyond that threshold of income. This means that if you make $99,000 as a single filer or $198,000 as a married couple, you will not receive any payment from the government. Individuals will also receive an additional $500 for any dependent who is claimed on their tax return and is under the age of 17. Alright, so you know all about those checks, and as long as the US government has your direct deposit information, you will receive that in your bank account within the next week or so. However, it's a very real possibility that this could be the first of several payments depending on how long and severe the economic fallout is from the current health crisis. At the time of filming this video on April 10th, 2020, cases of a particular virus are continuing to rise, but the models are showing that the curve is flattening, which is very encouraging news for sure. However, keep in mind that the economic fallout could last much longer than the virus itself, depending on how long businesses are forced to keep their doors shut and how many workers they have to lay off as a result. On Thursday, we found out that an additional 6.6 million Americans filed for unemployment, bringing the 3-week total to just shy of 17 million unemployed Americans. To put some perspective on those numbers, it took all the way from 2009 after the financial crash up until 2020 to create 20 million new jobs for Americans, which have almost entirely been wiped out in the past 3 weeks alone. But it's not all doom and gloom. Like I said, the curve is flattening, which is fantastic news on the health side of things, and it's likely that many of the jobs will return once businesses are able to reopen their doors. But for now, well over 100 million Americans are being asked to stay at home, and as a result, the economy is essentially entirely shut down with the exception of essential businesses. And that is what has led to the discussion about issuing a second round of payments to American workers. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi mentioned on a conference call on Monday that a second round of payments is likely inevitable and could easily top $1 trillion in additional support for small businesses and individuals. While it is unclear at the moment exactly what these payments would look like, several ideas have been tossed around by members of Congress, various senators, and even the president himself. The first and most obvious payment is an additional $1,200 check just like the first round to American workers. However, it has been mentioned that the qualifications to receive a check could be expanded as there were a number of loopholes in the first round of checks. For example, many college-age students are still claimed as a dependent on their parents' tax returns, but are over the age of 16 and therefore their parents do not receive the additional $500 in their stimulus check. This means that these college students who are mostly out of the job as a result of their universities closing do not receive any payment as a result of the most recent stimulus checks. I will be the first to admit that a majority of students who fall into this category are likely having a large portion of their expenses paid for by their parents, and as a result, they don't need a $1,200 check in order to survive. However, there are other dependent cases that were not addressed in the first round of stimulus checks. There are many older disabled Americans who live with their children and are claimed as a dependent on their children's tax returns as a result. Many of these Americans are still working taxpayers but will not receive a stimulus check since they are claimed on their child's tax return. This is just one of many loopholes in the first round of stimulus checks, and several members of Congress as well as senators have voiced their concerns, and it's likely that the next round of payments will be expanded to these individuals who may have fallen through the cracks, and that might include you. Another form of payment that could be included in the next round of stimulus checks is a new idea that was mentioned last week by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. He wants what's called hazard pay to be included in the next stimulus bill. This would increase pay for essential workers, including those in the healthcare field, in sanitation, and even individuals who work in grocery stores. The proposed fund would increase pay up to $25,000 or $13 an hour from the start of this crisis to the end of this year. Obviously, this was met with all sorts of responses, from those who say that the frontline workers should receive even more pay, to the individuals on the complete other side of the spectrum who believe that this is economically impossible and would be far too costly. Personally, I do see both sides of this argument, and while I don't believe that the total $13 an hour raise that was proposed will pass simply because of the current political environment in Washington, it is very possible that an hourly increase will be part of the next stimulus bill for these essential workers. Again, none of these are things that are written legislation yet, but are simply ideas that have been thrown around and could likely find their way into the final stimulus bill. While this was the majority of payment ideas that would directly affect American workers, the next bill will also likely include additional support for small businesses, as well as state and local governments. The president himself mentioned the idea of a $2 trillion infrastructure spending package that would include an overhaul of American highways and bridges. So as far as you as an individual, it's very likely that you may receive an additional payment, and depending on your line of work, you could even see a hefty pay raise that could even back pay to the beginning of this health crisis. But where is all this money coming from, and what are the economic repercussions of handing out so much money left and right? To put some perspective on the sheer size of these numbers, the stimulus package known as the Recovery Act, which was used to support the economy during the Great Recession in 2009, had an estimated total cost of $787 billion, which is a fraction of what has already been spent on the current stimulus package, with more spending likely to come. So the most obvious issue with pumping $2 trillion or more into the economy that has been brought up by economists across the board is the issue known as hyperinflation. I'm sure you know what this is, but in a nutshell, it occurs when governments begin printing money endlessly, and as a result, the value of each dollar drops since there are more dollars in circulation. That's exactly how countries like Zimbabwe ended up with a $100 trillion bill, yes, with a T, and at the time that was just the equivalent of 40 cents here in the US. And while inflation can be fixed through a process known as deflation, it often takes a long period of time and can have lasting effects on an economy. So is the US government printing trillions of dollars going to lead us down this road of hyperinflation? In my extremely unprofessional opinion that has absolutely no merit at all, I would say the chances of extreme inflation where a roll of toilet paper costs $2.6 million is extremely unlikely to occur here in the US. We have pretty strict monetary policies, and despite a few periods throughout history such as World War I and World War II where inflation did hit the double digits, the Fed has been able to regulate inflation between 2 and 4% over the past few decades. However, this doesn't mean that we won't see any form of inflation in our daily lives as a result of so much money being printed. And yes, I understand that the US government is not literally sending $100 bills to American workers, but the president of the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis did confirm that Congress has, quote, literally given the Federal Reserve the free authority to print money. The way that most Americans will see this reflected in their daily lives is a relative increase in prices on everyday goods. As more and more dollars are printed, each dollar has less value in the market, meaning that you will require more dollars in order to purchase the same item. Keep in mind that a dollar bill is nothing more than a fancy piece of paper that everyone agrees has the same value in the marketplace. A $20 bill is nothing more than an 11-cent piece of paper made by our government, but since you say it's worth $20 in the market and I say it's worth $20 in the market, we agree to trade, and that's often how prices are set on everyday goods. However, when everyone is being sent paycheck after paycheck without producing any value in the economy, like performing a service or selling a good, each dollar has less value, and if left uncontrolled, you end up with multi-million-dollar rolls of toilet paper. So in the end, you may see some minor price changes in your everyday life, but if you want my honest opinion that's, again, absolutely so unprofessional and has no merit in any way, I would say take advantage of these stimulus checks in every way you can. It's easy to talk and get upset when you read the headlines that the government is freely spending trillions of dollars, and anyone with a basic understanding of economics likely sees the damage that this can cause. However, the chance of hyperinflation happening here in the US is very low in my opinion, and while this will increase the national deficit that is already an astronomical number, getting upset over it really isn't going to change anything. The US government is probably going to pass a stimulus bill with whatever price tag they think is necessary, regardless of how you feel about it. So you might as well make yourself feel a little bit better and take advantage of these stimulus bills in any way you can. Remember that these are meant to stimulate the economy, so by being an educated citizen, you can use this check to support your local businesses and help get our economy back on its feet as soon as possible. And if you did fall through the cracks and will not be receiving a stimulus check for whatever reason, there are plenty of ways that we talked about in this video right here where you can not only stay on your feet, but come out ahead of this crisis and even help people in need while you're at it. As always, if you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below and I will be sure to get back to you. If you want to check out my video on the first round of stimulus checks that will likely post to your account within the next week, click right here. And if you want to get a free stock from Robinhood valued at up to $250, then click the first link down in the description below and you'll also help support my channel. And of course, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button if you did enjoy the video and you want to see more content like this in the future. Thank you so much for your time. I seriously appreciate it so much. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.